Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. Thanks for taking the time to join us to talk about Starbucks. My name is Mary, and these are my partners, Carmen and Eve. We're all students in account planning, and this is part of our final project for the class. We are here to have an open conversation with you about Starbucks and about the experience of fast coffee as a whole. We would like to know what you like, what you don't like, and how the fast food coffee experience might be improved. There are no wrong answers to any of these questions we ask, and we welcome you to have an open discussion with each other. So if you want to bounce ideas off of each other also, then that is perfectly okay and fine. Please feel free to share your point of view, even if it differs from what others have said. Keep in mind that we're just as interested in negative comments as positive comments, and at times the negative comments are the most helpful. So any thought that you have in regards to what we ask is useful for us, and we welcome it. Also, we are recording this session as part of the assignment, so we don't miss any of your comments. People often say very helpful things in these discussions, and we can't write fast enough to get them all down. So the recording will be put together with our assignment and help us create a campaign for Starbucks. Before we get started, can everyone please turn on their cameras so that we can all see each other for the recording and for the discussion? Thank you. First, let's all go around and say our names, and then we can begin the discussion questions. So I guess just jump in and say your name, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you. Either way is fine.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Eve.
I'm Liz. Oh, sorry, Eve.
Oh my gosh, Liz.
I'm Melissa.
I'm Carolyn.
Mhm.
I'm Carmen.
Perfect. All right, then. Carmen, take us to the first slide. What is your main motivation to get coffee? Why do you guys go and partake in coffee?
I recently have been trying to cut down on coffee, so I really only go to get coffee for like social reasons, or if I'm like going on like a 10-hour drive or something.
I go for the caffeine.
I go for kind of all of the above. I like the taste and the caffeine, and it's like a good starting point for the day, and then also throughout the day, and also maybe at the end of the day. I'm a big coffee fan, so it's a good starting point for me for that.
I also just really enjoy the I also just really enjoy like the taste and the flavor of it. Also like the caffeine's always a good perk.
I like the taste of coffee a lot, but I also get coffee very frequently during the academic year because I do need the caffeine very often. So, yeah.
All very good points and answers, and especially in regards to how people differentiated different parts of the day that they enjoy coffee and how their motivations for that change based on their circumstances. Thank you. That was very good. Next slide. What do you think of when you hear the company name Starbucks? What first comes to mind? What opinions do you have? What do you think about when you hear about Starbucks?
I used to work for Starbucks, so I think about that, and I guess just like the food too. Food comes to mind as well as coffee.
I think of the color green, randomly enough, that deep color green, like the art that's right on the sign there, and I also think of the price, where it's like a balance of, okay, like, do I want to splurge or do I want to save?
I definitely think of the smell of coffee, like really strong, rich coffee beans.
I think I usually just think of the drink at Starbucks that I tend to enjoy and think like, do I want to get that drink right now? Do I want to spend money on that drink? Like someone else said, price is a good point. Or do I want coffee somewhere else maybe? So, yeah.
Sometimes when I think of Starbucks, I usually think about their weird sizing names, and I usually like to get Starbucks like their frappuccinos and stuff. But remembering the names sometimes like Venti and Grande, it's just like very unique to Starbucks.
Question, follow up kind of for this. What's the first product that you think of when you think of Starbucks?
Definitely a frappuccino.
For me, I'd just say like iced coffee.
For me, the drink that I've been getting there lately is the iced chai tea latte. So usually that one or a frappuccino.
I would say the exact same thing. I usually, I would think like a general drink would be the frappuccino, but what I've been getting there most lately is the iced chai. So now I think of that versus like other companies' iced chais, and depending on which one I want, because there's a couple, but I think of those two.
That's a good segue actually to the next slide. What do you think some of Starbucks' main competitors are? Who would you name if you aren't picking Starbucks? Who do you think they compete with the most?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin', at least to me as the consumer, Dunkin' is Starbucks' greatest rival in my consumption of fast coffee.
I often think of McDonald's because of the like McCafe, as well as local coffee shops.
For me, definitely Dunkin'. I tend to do Dunkin' a lot more than Starbucks. I also really like Caribou coffee, but that's not as common down here. So yeah.
I definitely think of Dunkin' as far as coffee goes because it's the only other like coffee centric place.
I thought of one more. I also thought of Panera because they do that like drink month subscription. It's like $7. You can get a drink every day. So I think they're really coming for Starbucks with that one.
No, those are very good points. And thank you for the addition of companies. Because obviously, Starbucks, their main selling is their coffee. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of other brands that, yes, they have other things, but now they're also branching into coffee, and you can also get that in a quicker manner like Starbucks. On that note, the next slide. What do you think Starbucks can do to stand out against these competitors? So you've heard about all these other businesses and corporations that kind of fill the same-ish niche that Starbucks is in. So what do you think Starbucks can do in order to stand out, or what it already does to stand out in your minds?
I think what Starbucks does, at least for me, stands out the most is that, like, I understand Dunkin' Donuts has, like, their cups and stuff that you could buy in store, but I feel like Starbucks advertises it more with, like, their pretty cups and the ones they get monthly or the Christmas ones that come out and they change color when you put hot or cold drinks in it, like that kind of stuff. Um, so I definitely think their products of that sense stand out more for competitors rather than just their coffee.
I
think
also
Starbucks.
think that Starbucks really like unique drinks are one of their big selling points because they'll have like seasonal drinks, like different kinds of frappuccinos at different times of the year. And competitors like Dunkin' just don't change up their drinks as often. They do sometimes, but it's usually just not as good or not as well advertised.
I agree. I also think that Starbucks should definitely improve its point system. Because I know that whenever I go to Starbucks, obviously like I scan like the app and stuff like that. And they obviously have like built-in app procedures where you can like use like the Starbucks card and stuff like that. But as somebody, who I don't go to Starbucks as frequently or something like that, I'm not going to use the different like specific ones that they have. And like the process for streamlining like making their Starbucks card versus incorporating like other ways of getting points in the app, I think it's a lot. Like the points don't weigh as much at Starbucks when you buy a drink, even though it's more expensive than other competitors like Dunkin' Donuts. Like the points go way farther at a place like Dunkin' Donuts when I go to Dunkin' for a drink that's half the cost at Starbucks with more quantity. So it makes me want to go to Dunkin' more because not only am I getting more drink for like my buck, I'm also getting more points, which eventually leads to greater products like, like I can get free drinks more often and it covers more variety of sizes, where Starbucks has a lot more terms and conditions. So I think that they could do a lot more, especially with how much more their products are priced. And to be fair, it's quality over, maybe not so much as quantity like other competitors do. But I think they could do a lot more to incentivize and streamline like their in-app procedures and like their Starbucks cards and like the way that their point system works, especially given, how prominent they are across the United States.
I
I
totally
would.
agree. Oh,
No, you go.
okay. I totally agree. I really like Dunkin' more than Starbucks, to be honest, because I can get more coffee for less money. And in my personal opinion, it is better coffee. And that's why I like some of the Starbucks specialty drinks. I like their Frappuccinos, but it's very frequent, particularly as a student, when I just need a coffee with caffeine. And I feel like places like Dunkin' Donuts serve it better for less money. So it's not, even though I think that advertising the specialty drinks is definitely a way to stand out against competitors. But for me, I kind of just want better coffee for less money.
I was gonna say I thought it was interesting that you say that the point system is like not good, because I always think of, I feel like my main driver for going to Starbucks is usually like me having money on my, or points in my like account, points or money. Like I'll be like, oh, I have $5 on my app. I might as well go to Starbucks and spend it. And then I always end up reloading, and then there's just perpetual money on my app. So that draws me in, as well as I do think in comparison to competitors, Starbucks has like the highest quality beans, and just like I feel like their coffee is the most I don't know, stands out against competitors like Dunkin'. Dunkin's coffee has almost never impressed me. McDonald's is surprisingly really good, but only for like drip. Their espresso sucks. Starbucks has espresso on lock. I think they have that. That's like their strong suit, I think. As well as I do think the Starbucks stores are much more inviting. I would never go into a Dunkin' and sit there for 2 hours. It's like kind of cold and bright and orange in there. Whereas, and same with like McDonald's is kind of like gray and cold. Whereas Starbucks uses mood lighting. The music is usually like really ambient and nice. It smells great in there. It's never too loud. And it's a great place to like enjoy your coffee rather than like get it and like leave. Although they usually, I'll say usually, are pretty good with like drive-through times and stuff. I do think that's one thing that they can improve upon. As a former barista, I think that lately or maybe it is just a Tallahassee thing, because like in my store in Tampa, we were trained very, I don't know, the training was like very thorough, and we like learned about like how important it was to standardize everything, which is one thing that I think Dunkin' slacks on. Sometimes you'll order one thing at one Dunkin' and it'll taste completely different at another Dunkin', where Starbucks like really tries to make everything exactly the same no matter where you order it. But here in Tallahassee, I've not experienced that as much. I think that the quality is lacking, and the drive-through times are horrible, absolutely terrible. Whereas I think in other places it's usually better. I will say that usually the Starbucks drive-through lines are like better, but I like the cafe experience a lot more than drive-through.
I agree completely. I actually noticed that Starbucks also has really good placement, as in like not just like their individual like standalone stores, but being in like the school library or certain stores like Target, where you can like just easily pick it up and walk around the store, instead of if you wanted something like Dunkin' or a different coffee, you would have to go somewhere else than where you were already going.
All of these were very excellent points. Thank you. Especially, I appreciate all of the comparisons to what you guys know in your own experiences, because that is what we're looking for. We're looking for how all of these individual consumers interpret it, to see if there's any commonalities or anything that you guys share. So that's really good. And then we can move on to our next slide. What do you know about Starbucks? What do you want to know about this company? Any thoughts that come to mind with these questions?
I guess it's kind of like, why did they choose those odd names, as like a large is considered a venti, why medium's a grande, and then there's a tall, and then there's even a trenta, which is above a venti. Like, what made this company come up with such odd names that we use on a regular basis at other, fast food chains or other coffee places, as a large and a medium and a small?
I know way too much about Starbucks, not only from working there for 2 years, but also because as a business major at FSU, I feel like Starbucks is used as an example of like a company in every single marketing class that I've ever been in, because they did like something very revolutionary with their marketing, I guess, according to my professors. Um, so yeah, I know all about their core values, the like third place or whatever they try to do. I know all that, and I know where their coffee comes from. I know the recipes. I will say, before I worked at Starbucks, things I would have liked to have known were like the standard recipe, like for the different sizes, because I feel like that would have helped me in customizing my own drinks, because I didn't really learn how to customize drinks the way I like them until I worked there and really understood how they made the drinks. I could never really figure out how people knew how many pumps of stuff went into the cups if they hadn't worked there before, because I definitely didn't. I don't know where you find that information, but I feel like that's something that if it was shared more, like even just like in the store on a sign, like, oh, if you get a grande with syrup, it'll get 4 pumps. Do with that what you will. Like, then you can ask for 3 or whatever, depending on how you like it. I feel like that might be really helpful, just based on what I knew and what I know now.
I agree. And I think something that it wasn't a campaign per se as much as it was like a specialty store type of thing. But when I was in Chicago a couple of years ago, and I think it was Chicago. And when I was there, they had like a massive, like 2-story tall Starbucks store. And obviously, I know that that is not something that is replicable on any mass stage because it was like a specific store. But something that I thought was really cool was that they had like regions kind of, and in each like region was like the bags of coffee that they sell and that they made in their coffees and stuff like that. And it was like specialty coffee, so it was like the Sumatran coffee that was like in like the Africa region, or if it was like the Costa coffee from Costa Rica, and then they had it like they had like the basically they showed like where the coffee was coming from and they themed it off of that. So I guess it's kind of cool to see how they're incorporating the regions of the where the coffee that they're selling is coming from, especially that's coffee that you'll be buying like in the stores. So it's kind of cool to see how they like themed, like they not only that, they like decorated like the bags based off of the region that it was coming from, and they kind of had like a little history of where that coffee originated and how it tastes different than coffee that's on other regions. So I think that's really cool, especially because there are so many different brands and different types of coffee that Starbucks offers, to kind of see that like regional differences and stuff and see kind of where it's coming from, and like what Starbucks has like done in the region kind of to be getting that coffee on like that grand scale, and kind of seeing how it's incorporated into different recipes and like what it's like used best with. I think would also be something that they could improve on even more in that, is like what recipes does this type of coffee go best with, and does it work best with an espresso, does it work best in an iced drink, or something like that. So I always thought that that was pretty cool, and that always stuck with me because of how cool they had themed that particular store, but also like in general, knowing more about like where that coffee came from and how to pair it in different drinks like that.
When I think about Starbucks and what I want to know about the company, usually when I go to any place that works with food, I think about, I used to work at a smoothie place, and it was not very good working conditions. So sometimes I think about places like that, and I wonder what the working conditions are at Starbucks, especially because Starbucks is very popular, especially on college campuses. I go around my campus and very long lines at Starbucks all the time. So I wonder if the workers are getting any breaks and such. So yeah, I think about the working conditions, and I think about Starbucks at the airport. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of thinking about right now as well, because I have quite a bit of travel ahead of me in the next month or so. So they're just open very early. So I kind of wonder how long they're open at the airport and how early the workers have to get up and everything. So yeah, that's a bit random, but that's what I think about when I think about Starbucks and the company.
No, those are all very excellent points. And unless anyone else thinks of anything that they want to add, also, if any of you think of something along the line, feel free to mention it. So if a question from before you didn't have anything to say, but you think of something later, go ahead. It is welcome at all times. But on to our next slide. What trends do you see happening in the coffee industry? Any trends at all. It could be anything you think of. Feel free to build off of each other as well.
Immediately, first thing that
Just
comes to
recently I've
mind
actually
is
noticed that more and more coffee places are trying specifically the cake batter flavor. I noticed because usually that's like my favorite flavor in foods, but Dunkin' actually does that really terribly. I haven't seen Starbucks try it yet, but I've also seen other smaller cafes do that better than Dunkin' at least. But I've noticed that there have been like common flavors being popped up around different coffee like cafes.
I was gonna say the first thing that comes to mind is the cold foam trend, which I know started at Starbucks. I think they invented that around like 2018 or 19, and it really picked up in like the last 2 years. And now I know Dunkin' has a version of that. I don't know about anybody else. I don't really, I mean, I feel like some local coffee places may be trying to replicate that. I'm not so sure, but that's definitely like a huge trend I've noticed.
Something I've noticed too is that, I mean, obviously I go to Dunkin', probably more frequently than I do to Starbucks, but something that I notice pretty frequently at Dunkin' is that I think that they've kind of ramped up their menu to compete with Starbucks. So I noticed that like sometimes Starbucks will come out with like a new type of drink, and then a couple of like months later, Dunkin' will have their own version of it, just slightly different, and to be fair, slightly worse than what Starbucks does. Like I noticed that Dunkin' has a new version of like the Starbucks refresher and stuff like that, and they have their own versions of that, and they came out with different food items that are very similar to Starbucks in order to kind of like compete with that. So I think a larger trend in kind of every other coffee store competing with Starbucks, because I think Starbucks is the industry leader, is that people are also placing a lot more emphasis on like food and stuff like that. Dunkin' has really expanded their menu to include a lot of different varieties of new food items. And I also think that as much as Starbucks and Dunkin' are both about coffee, they're also expanding a lot on like their non-coffee drinks too, like their refreshers, especially, and like other types of like teas and stuff like that. Like I think like matcha is a big thing. I haven't seen that. I mean, like it's kind of always been around, but I feel like I've seen it even more emphasized in like Starbucks and in Dunkin' too. So that's the two things that I would say is that like non-coffee drinks, in it, like in addition to different varieties of regular coffee drinks, as well as more emphasis on like fast food type of stuff that's still aligned with what would be eaten in conjunction with coffee, have really changed a lot in both Starbucks like and Dunkin', and that other companies are also adjusting to what Starbucks is doing to compete with them.
I think some other trends that I'm also seeing are more plant-based food items as well. They're starting to come out with more that are less meat and less cheese, and some that are additional options for those that are vegan or vegetarian.
This is low key unrelated, but I just remembered that I just saw at Trader Joe's the other day that Trader Joe's has completely copied the Starbucks egg bites. They now have an egg bite and like regular egg bite with cheddar and bacon, which is exactly the same as the Starbucks one. And I tried the egg white ones and they're not good. Would not recommend.
Yeah, I totally agree with some of the other points that were made. I think that I couldn't really tell because I'm really just getting more interested in tea more recently, but I think that there does seem to be more of a lean towards more non-coffee drinks in Starbucks and generally the coffee industry, and more different options for people with different dietary restrictions, not just food, but in the drinks as well. All kinds of different milk, like coconut milk. I hadn't heard of that until recently, relatively recently. um, I think there's also one thing I've noticed. This is very much a Starbucks thing, I think, generally. But the TikToks in the coffee industry and the way that people make TikToks and they're like, oh, like this is the special drink that I get at Starbucks and I get like one pump of this and one scoop of that. And that's how you make the special drink. And then it's promoted through um, TikTok or people who pull into the drive through and at Starbucks or wherever coffee place. And they're like, just make me your favorite drink. And then that video gets popular on TikTok. So yeah, I think that's something that I've seen happening lately in the coffee industry.
Thank you guys. That is all very good, all very accurate trends that I feel like I've also seen myself. Also pup cups. That was just something that you guys made me think of, but pup cups and like having your pets go through a drive-through for coffee places now is becoming a trend. On to the next slide though. Thinking about things that make you the last time you bought coffee. Think back on the last time you bought coffee. For some of us, that was today. For some of us, that was a week ago. Was there anything that made it a positive experience for you? And was there anything that made it a negative one? Also, if you bought tea or like you went to one of these places last time, same question still applies. What is something that's made you think of what are your experiences like?
So I had a positive and a negative experience. I think a positive experience is when they don't burn the espresso in the drink that they give you. I've gotten lattes from Starbucks that are very bitter and sour because they would reuse the espresso machine with the same coffee grounds that they gave to the person behind.
I had just had coffee today, actually. We had gone out and bought some, and it was made a particularly positive experience because yesterday I also had coffee from the same place. It was from Dunkin', and it was terrible, like the worst coffee I'd ever had. It was the exact same order, but just really bad for some reason. So having good coffee after having bad coffee made it a much more pleasant experience.
Last time I got coffee was from the Frother's Daughter, which is a food truck. And I will say the best part of the experience was it was incredibly fast. Like the line moved really fast. And then almost like right after ordering my drink, they had it ready for me. Other positive things was like the employees were like super nice, super friendly. It wasn't just like about the transaction. There's a little bit more like, oh, like, how are you? Love your shoes. The only negative experience was I ordered a mocha and it literally had so much mocha in it. I was like, oh my God, this is basically chocolate milk. So that just kind of goes back on what I said earlier, where like it's nice to be able to see how much syrup is going to go in your drink before you order it.
I was just at Black Dog Cafe in Tallahassee and this morning, where I got coffee and food. And one of the things that I always like about going there specifically for coffee is that um, they are like very consistent with their recipe. I don't know what the recipe is, but it's sometimes like in my experience going to Dunkin' is that every time I go to Dunkin', it's like they're changing the recipe for every drink. Do I always go to Dunkin' still regardless? Yes, but it is a very inconsistent experience. And if I wasn't so loyal, then I would stop going to Dunkin'. But the one thing about Black Dog is that it, is very consistently made and it's always very good. And their food, it is always is a great quantity of food for their cost. Like one specific thing about Black Dog is that I got a bagel with cream cheese there, and they give you like a very generous helping of cream cheese there. And I always just appreciated that very randomly from them. Because sometimes at Dunkin' or at Starbucks, it felt like, they were kind of like not like jipping you on like the cream cheese, but like not giving you like a good amount of cream cheese. And I get the idea that it's like, whatever, some people might like less cream, whatever, I don't care. I would prefer, like, I like that they kind of give you as much value for your dollar that you're spending there. for food to get like a better experience from that. So I think that's one thing that I liked in particular from there. But that's like one negative that I would say about Dunkin' is that their food and their drinks can sometimes be very inconsistent, not only just within a store, but also within like between different stores. And while Starbucks isn't as inconsistent, I think it sometimes can also vary a little bit. And it's in my experience at Starbucks, only a few of their products I like compared to most of like Dunkin's products, if that makes sense.
You just made me think of something else that I like just want to mention is that one thing that I think makes an experience worse for me, and one of the reasons I don't go to Dunkin' is because I hate when like you're in the store and they've given you an order number and you have to wait for your order number to be called. I would much rather have my name misspelled on a cup and like butchered and like be like, oh, that's like my name. I don't know. It's easier when you're like doing something to hear and recognize your name being called than like 476. I don't know. I hate that about Dunkin', and I feel like the orders get mixed up more easily. It's very easy to tell what's yours at Starbucks and most local coffee shops when your name is like literally written on the cup or on the bag of food.
I feel like also that there's a difference in the workers too. Like the workers at Starbucks are much more cheery and happy, and more conversating with you rather than Dunkin' workers. I feel like they're there to do their job and kind of just be done with it. But Starbucks workers, I feel like, are more engaging.
I feel like it's kind of funny that someone brought up the name thing. My name is very frequently misspelled with two T's, so it's usually wrong, which used to be when I was a lot younger, used to be frustrating to me, but now I think it's kind of funny. And my brother is convinced that that is how Starbucks advertises themselves and makes themselves different as in one way from other places that sell coffee, because then people post on TikTok or wherever and they're like, look, Starbucks spelled my name wrong. Um, so I guess that used to be sort of a negative experience for me. I haven't bought coffee in a long time, actually, because I haven't been doing in-person classes since the spring semester. So I haven't been on campus and studying on campus. And I've just been making coffee at home with some coffee I have from Buddy Brew. But I think the last time I went to Starbucks to get coffee, I actually got tea. I got an iced chai tea latte. And I remember standing there and watching them make it after I had just paid like $5 for it, and half of my cup was just ice. And I watched them fill it with the tea, and I realized I really just paid like $5 for just a very small amount of drink. So, and I ordered a grande, so that was a bit disappointing to me. And I realized maybe I should just start trying to make more chai at home. So yeah, I think that was a sort of negative experience, but the tea was still really good, the little that I had. So yeah.
An excellent segue actually to our next slide. Um, what is something that would deter you from buying Starbucks products? So you can call on past experiences for this, like we just heard, or any other factor about the brand coffee or any of their other products or aspects.
I definitely think that the price is way too high for Starbucks. It's just cheaper in so many other places. And even though a lot of places like Dunkin' in certain areas are increasing their prices, I definitely feel like Starbucks doesn't give you enough actual product for the price that you're paying. Um, Sometimes I would buy like group orders for like me and my friends because I would go out and get Starbucks and bring it back to them. And it would be like an outrageous expense for like 3 drinks and a croissant.
For me, when I drive by Starbucks and the line is like around the entire building, I'm just not going at that point. I'm gonna go get something else. Like it's not even worth it. Price is less of a deterrent for me. I feel like for the quality, Starbucks' price is pretty on par with like the price of like a local coffee joint. I do think it's definitely more expensive than Dunkin' or like a coffee from McDonald's or like what those kinds of places or like Panera. But I do think it's like higher quality usually. So that doesn't deter me, but I see that it would deter other people definitely. The only other thing I guess is like when when I've had a recent really bad experience, I'll usually like swear it off for a while, but then like come growing back later when I forget about the experience. Those are pretty much my deterrents.
Yeah, mine is also cost. Especially because sometimes like if I'm thirsty and I'm hungry, I can get a small food and a drink at Dunkin' for just about the same price as I could for like a grande, like frappuccino or something at Starbucks. Like obviously it's like a little bit more Dunkin' it, but I'm basically getting like twice the amount of drink and a snack for the same price as like a medium drink that like somebody else had pointed out, like with a lot of ice and not a lot of drink in it, for that same price. So it's definitely like um it like encourages me more to go to Dunkin' because then I know I can get like a snack and a drink rather than spend, like just about the same amount of money on a drink where, it's half ice, half drink and no snack at the same time. So that is definitely something that deters me. But if I ever want like quality or if I'm in like a studying mood, then obviously I go to Starbucks, because I do agree with, stuff that everybody else has said that it has the right environment. But if I'm, just kind of like I'm a student, if I'm just kind of going to class in the morning or, I'm just kind of on the move, I'm usually going to get a Dunkin'.
Yeah, I think definitely price for me, especially during the academic semester when I'm on campus. Because this past year I've been on campus 5 days a week, and I usually go and get coffee at least like 3 days a week, while I'm on campus like all day. So definitely price. If the line is super long, which it usually is, I won't go and get it. And this is kind of a weird thing, but I usually, if I'm on campus and I haven't gotten much sleep the night before, I need something with more caffeine. And the Starbucks products that I like the most don't actually have a lot of caffeine. I just don't really like their more basic iced coffee. I like their Frappuccino a lot, but the Frappuccino does not have a lot of caffeine for me. And I feel like the iced coffee that I like from Dunkin' Donuts gives me more of the caffeine boost that I need as a student. And so that will be a, a factor that will keep me from going to Starbucks.
I think I kind of agree with the whole factor from, getting Starbucks is that there is more ice in the drinks. And when the lines are long, I am going to turn around and go somewhere else. And when I do also want something that has more caffeine in the drinks, I get either have little to none as well. Kind of deters me from, going to Starbucks where I can get something better from somewhere else.
Bit of a follow-up question based on what you guys are saying. Is there anything off the top of your heads that if Starbucks did better or changed would make you go to Starbucks more rather than be deterred? So is there any immediate fix or change that if Starbucks implemented, you would be more likely, you think, to go and partake in them?
For me, I was just thinking about this because someone mentioned like the frappuccinos not having enough caffeine. The stuff they put in the frappuccinos, they call it frap roast. It literally smells like soy sauce when you like smell the stuff like in this, like just from a worker's perspective. This is like what I know. The frap roast is disgusting. It comes in a bag of powder. You mix it with water. It messes up my stomach so bad. It's fake coffee basically. It's not when you order like a coffee frappuccino, that's not real coffee in there. It's like something fake and disgusting. I think they should put actual espresso or cold brew in their frappuccinos. I think it would make them taste and be just so much better for the clients, especially because the frappuccinos are so expensive. I think the main like reason they're priced so high is because they're like more time consuming to make, but it's not like they're paying the employees anymore to make them. So they might as well be putting real coffee in them. I would never, I like as a former employee, I've never bought a Frappuccino since working there because they disgust me. But if they changed the recipe, I definitely would.
I think one thing for me would definitely be the prices on some of their sandwiches. Like if I were to get a grande, like ice white chocolate mocha, I think that's like $5, and then my order would go all the way to like $14 for like a ham and Swiss panini. Like it's just kind of a big price jump, and you can either really only get one or the other if you're tight on money.
Yeah, I think price is a big thing. I think that um, well, either if their coffee was a bit cheaper, because Dunkin' is cheaper, and that frequently is what takes me to Dunkin'. But I think I haven't tried their iced coffee in a long time because I just didn't really like it, or the mocha. But as I remember, it was just way too bitter for me. So maybe if they made it a little sweeter or something, then I'd be more interested in the coffee. And if it was a bit cheaper, then I'd probably be more interested in buying it.
I agree with all of that. I'm a vegetarian, so I usually just get the sandwiches from Dunkin', and I'll get like the tomato and mozzarella, like panini, and that's only like 30-50 cents cheaper than the sandwiches that have like meat and stuff in them. And I'm like, it has no business being that expensive for something that doesn't even have like meat on it. Like, because the meat I get, it's like, it's, this, not to say like in this economy, but in this economy, but I think like that's also just like, I'm like, that is so expensive for no reason when I can go to Dunkin' and get a cheaper sandwich.
I see that we switched to the next slide, which is actually fine. For our next slide, the reason I asked that follow-up question is because this question, what are some things you look for when deciding where to get coffee or other fast food products from coffee-focused businesses? It may feel a little bit repetitive because I feel like a lot of you touched on this question in your last response. But if there's anything that you haven't mentioned already, or a factor in general that you consider most, like if you guys could say, this is the thing I consider most when looking for these types of products, then that's also very helpful to us. I'm gonna do a
I
quick,
usually go off of,
yeah.
oh, I was just going to say, I usually go off of past experience, as well as I'm usually trying to like only buy from local businesses. So Starbucks is usually like only comes to mind if I'm like really in a pinch.
Mm-hmm.
Something I like to do actually is I frequently choose whichever is closest to me. Um, in the last semester, I lived closer to a Starbucks, so even though I generally get Dunkin' more, I was getting Starbucks like multiple times a week just because it was so close to where I live.
I definitely do not go out of my way to get food from Starbucks. I only go if I'm getting a drink, and then I think about it either in the line or on the way there. It's not initially the first thought when I think of Starbucks is getting their food.
Yeah, conveniency is definitely a big thing for me, and probably the most important thing when I'm thinking about where I want to get coffee. A lot of conveniency in terms of location. Usually when I do end up at Starbucks, it's because it's right by me and it's just very easy. Or price is a big thing. I know someone said local businesses. I do really try, not so much um, here. I'm in Gainesville, not so much here in Gainesville, but when I travel more often, I try and do more local coffee shops and explore a little bit more of where I am, especially like coffee shops and bookstores. I love that. So, yeah.
Excellent points. And we can move on to our last pre-written question basically for this. Has COVID-19, or how has COVID-19 impacted the way you view acquiring coffee?
I think since COVID really hit and Starbucks was, more towards opening like towards the end where you can go in line again and get everything. It definitely was very, again, convenient for me to go in the line and get coffee rather than worried about where I'm supposed to go because a lot of things are closed down. So I think that that really impacted the way that I would get coffee.
I think the pandemic made me get coffee more, because not only was it like a little adventure out of getting out of my house to go on like a little trip to get like a treat basically, I also, as stupid as that sounds, is what it was. And it also was just like a way for me to kind of like get caffeine like out and about. So if anything, it like improved the way that or like the measure that I would get coffee at, and why would I get it more frequently and stuff. And I don't know really if it made me get different types of coffee, but I would just go get coffee more frequently from either Starbucks or Dunkin', and I did tend to go to Dunkin' more, but it still made me go like get more coffee because it was like a little adventure. So it was like an experience kind of.
Bit of a follow-up question I actually have to that, not specifically to you, Melissa, but to everyone. You mentioned going to get like how you weren't more likely to try different types of coffee. In general, when you guys are going to places like this, do you tend to stick to your stable order, the same thing, or are you often more likely to branch out, try something new? Or when do you try a new product typically, if you try a new product?
I usually just get the same thing everywhere I go. Like Dunkin', it's all the time medium mocha iced coffee. But the only times I ever really try something different is if someone suggests it to me. The first time I tried a frappuccino was because a friend suggested it. The first time I tried coffee in general, it was because it was suggested to me. So it's definitely mostly on like the suggestion of my friends and the people around me.
I'm a total sucker for like specials. So like seasonal drinks. I mean, even like recently, the boba place I go to started doing like a Stranger Things themed boba. I ordered it. I didn't even look at the ingredients. I was like, sounds good to me. Like, give it to me. It was really good. So, but usually, like, I'll order like when it comes to Starbucks, like I know I like the cold brew. So I will order the cold brew, but I mean, I like to switch it up.
Typically for me, I tend to find a favorite or two at a coffee shop and then just stick to it. Especially coffee shops that cost a bit more money. Starbucks is a bit pricey to me because I don't want to spend like $5, $6 on a drink that I don't end up liking at all. So usually when I branch out and try new coffee and new drinks and such, it's usually because a friend recommended it to me.
I usually pick a couple that I like at Starbucks and I kind of keep it that way and I rotate depending on what I want. But I've also gotten to trying some of the TikTok trends that, that they've put out saying, oh, if you do one pump of this or, this or that, I do go and try that once in a while.
Yeah, I'm kind of a combination of like all of that. Like usually it's based off of like a friend's recommendation, or if I've like tried it, like a friend ordered it and I tried it and I liked it, I'll order a similar version. And it's also I think the yeah, like if a friend, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, basically if like a friend recommended it to me, or if they didn't, then I usually, oh, that's what it was, I usually know more of like what I don't like rather than like what I do. So usually the drinks that don't like that have ingredients that I do like that I don't like not like, I guess, if that makes sense. I know it's like confusing, but those are ones that I think I could typically like probably enjoy, and sometimes I do. But I think somebody else pointed out that I don't really want to waste my money on a drink that I'm not sure if I'm going to like, so I do tend to stick to the stuff that I like, and then I have like a few options that I kind of go in between that I know I like there, and that's what I go to Starbucks for.
Thank you. Do we have one last slide, correct? Perfect. Does anyone have any last minute comments, discussion points that they want to add? If not, then we'll close it. But if anyone has any last minute thing, this is the time. And if anyone thinks of something later, feel free to reach out to me, Eve, or Carmen with anything you think of after the fact. But thank you all for participating in this focus group today. Your responses are greatly appreciated and will be used towards our assignment. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you all once again.